Welcome to the second episode of The Real Wall, a series on the issue of separation of church and state in America. In the previous video, we saw some of the history and philosophy that surely impacted the thinking and political decisions of the Founding Fathers. This episode will feature the words of the founders themselves, with special attention to the governing documents that clearly establish the separation of church and state. Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. So wrote President and Founding Father Thomas Jefferson in an 1802 letter to the Danbury Baptists. The letter is the earliest instance of the phrase separation of church and state and links the concept to the First Amendment. As most of us know, the First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. According to Jefferson, this amendment intended that government should not interfere with religious affairs, and religion should not interfere with government affairs. However, Jefferson was far from the only founder who felt this way. James Madison is regarded as the father of the Constitution and the father of the Bill of Rights, being that he was the man largely responsible for writing both documents. Madison was the first president to have served in Congress, a close friend to Jefferson, and he was a firm believer in securing the rights of the minority against the tyranny of the majority. In the Annals of Congress, from 1789, Madison summarized his phrasing and intentions with the First Amendment. Congress should not establish a religion and enforce the legal observation of it by law, nor compel men to worship God in any manner contrary to their conscience, or that one sect might obtain a preeminence, or two combine together, and establish a religion to which they would compel others to conform. In a letter to Jasper Adams in 1832, Madison further explained the necessity for separating church and state, noting how the tendency to a usurpation on one side or the other, or to a corrupting coalition or alliance between them, will be best guarded against by entire abstinence of the government from interference in any way whatever, beyond the necessity of preserving public order and protecting each sect against trespasses on its legal rights by others. These words, from the author of the First Amendment himself, indisputably confirm the separation of church and state in American government, and it is shown to date back to the very origins of the United States. Protecting the freedom of religion requires the freedom from religion, and yet some people have noted that the Bill of Rights was not applied to state governments until 1868 with the passage of the 14th Amendment. But if we read the writings of Madison and Jefferson, we see that both men, who were so instrumental in structuring the foundations of American government, did not favor states to have freedom from the First Amendment or the separation of church and state. In 1785, James Madison wrote the Memorial and Remonstrance against Religious Assessments to oppose a bill which would have authorized tax support for Christian ministers in the state of Virginia. Some of Madison's most inspiring statements on the separation of church and state can be found in this document. Who does not see that the same authority which can establish Christianity in exclusion of all other religions may establish with the same ease any particular sect of Christians in exclusion of all other sects? Whilst we assert for ourselves a freedom to embrace, to profess, and to observe the religion which we believe to be of divine origin, we cannot deny an equal freedom to those whose minds have not yet yielded to the evidence which has convinced us. If this freedom be abused, it is an offense against God, not against man. To God, therefore, not to man, must an account of it be rendered. Jefferson's famous letter resulted from a state conflict with religious freedom, too. In Connecticut, the Danbury Baptists were a minority group, and they had written to Jefferson expressing concerns that religious majorities in their state would gain power and receive undue favor, at the cost of equal religious freedom for those of other, less popular faiths. Even though our government took some time to recognize separation at the state level, men like Jefferson and Madison made their feelings very clear in condemnatory letters, and the author of the Bill of Rights had even desired for the 10 Amendments to be fully incorporated into the Constitution, to serve as law on both federal and state levels. Speaking of the Constitution, one can notice it is quite a godless document, especially when compared to the Mayflower Compact, the Articles of Confederation, and other governing documents of the time, which were not shy about putting God high on their priorities. Even the Declaration of Independence has a few vague references to a creator, but the Constitution is devoid of any such references, including the preamble. We can think of the preamble as the introduction and thesis of an essay. It expresses what the founders intended for the Constitution to mean and what they hoped to achieve with it. If the intentions were to establish the United States of America in Christian principles or under the authority of the Christian God, surely the preamble would be a perfect spot to make such a statement, and yet nothing of the sort is addressed. The absence of God from the Constitution was an issue in the 1831 debate between the religious conservative Origen Batchelor and Robert Dale Owen, who was a member of the House and author of the 14th Amendment. In the course of the debate, Owen refers to a sermon delivered by a clergyman just a year before. The sermon seems to indicate that the clergyman had access to a record of the congressional proceedings that took place during the formation of the Constitution. The proceedings, as published by Thompson, the secretary, show that the question was gravely debated in Congress whether God should be in the Constitution or not, and after solemn debate he was deliberately voted out of it, that the men whose arguments swayed to vote God out of the Constitution, to declare that there should be no religious test, and that Congress should make no law to establish religion, were atheists in principle. In 1797, President John Adams signed the Treaty of Tripoli, which states in Article 11 that the government of the United States of America is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Mussulmen, and as the said states never entered into any war or act of hostility against any Mohammedan nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries. Article 11 is further evidence to the attitude of the founders on the issue of separating church and state, as they recognized that a nation founded upon one religion would be contrary to the rights and freedoms enjoyed by another, such as the Muslims spoken of in the treaty. Some who are still desperate to deny separation will claim that Article 11 was not in the original Arabic text of the treaty. While they are correct, they ignore the bigger point, which was laid out by Hunter Miller in 1931, when he was commissioned to analyze U.S. treaties. Mr. Miller noted flaws in translation between the Arabic original and Joel Barlow's English rendering, as well as the absence of Article 11, but concluded by saying, "It is to be remembered that the Barlow translation is that which was submitted to the Senate, and which is printed in the statutes at large, and in treaty collections generally. It is that English text which in the United States has always been deemed the text of the treaty." To put it plainly, only those who know next to nothing of our country's history and the philosophy of the Founding Fathers, or who wish to remain willfully ignorant for religious reasons, will deny the separation of church and state and think themselves in the right. However, I believe a good portion of the opposition comes from unfounded fear, too. The purpose of separating church and state is not to keep religious people out of politics. Religious affiliation is a perfectly allowable reason for an individual to vote for a candidate, oppose a bill, or take a stand on any social issue. What the First Amendment actually declares is that religious institutions or groups cannot impose laws based solely on religious principles. In other words, you can't ban abortion or criminalize adultery simply because you think the Bible says we should, and the reason for this is that eventually one faith would wind up forbidding something that is crucial to another faith, and then the free exercise of religion goes right out the door. I am continually amazed at how Christians don't seem to understand that the separation of church and state is not in place to limit personal faith, but is there to protect it. If Islam became the dominant political force in America and gained influence to impose Sharia law or establish 5 times of prayer at school each day facing Mecca, I think Christians would be screaming for separation. And this is exactly why it exists, so that no one religion can deprive the others of their religious rights, allowing everyone to worship or not worship God in whatever manner they see fit. In the next episode, we'll look more at the assertion of our country being founded on supposed Christian principles, and see some of the founders' thoughts specifically on Christianity. Thanks for watching this video, and please rate and/or comment if you enjoyed it.